Well, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, and welcome to this day 2 and session 4 of the AMBA and BGA Festival of Excellence. I'm delighted to introduce Leading Change at Business Schools and Inspiring Lifelong Learning, kindly sponsored by Studious Digital Education. And shortly, I'll hand over to Ivan Mitchell, the CEO of Studious Digital Education, to chair the session. We have some amazing, incredible panelists with us today who are really keen to discuss this issue. But before I do, just to remind you all that the session will be recorded. So if you miss anything or you just want to catch up, we'll send you the recording in about a week from today, so you can catch up on everything then. But also we want the session to be as interactive as possible. So you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions at all, just pop them in for the panel, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can towards the end of the 90-minute conversation. So without further ado, I'll hand straight over to Ivan to start the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Well, it's a privilege to be with you all today and to come and sort of chair this session. We've got a very esteemed panel lined up to talk through these themes of leading change at business schools and inspiring lifelong learning. And so I think to start with, what would be good is if we just go around and have a quick introduction from our panelists, and who can sort of give a bit of background about their what brings them here today. So Gaia, would you like to sort of kick us off with that?
Hi everybody, thank you Ivan, thank you everybody. What a pleasure it is to be here. As you can see, I'm from the World Health Organization. My name is Gaia Gamhevage. I'm a medical doctor as I started my career, but I am a lifelong learner. I've shifted into public health, into leadership training. Currently, I lead all learning and capacity development for the World Health Organization's Health Emergencies Program. I am leading the development of a lifelong learning strategy for the future of public health that goes beyond our organization. I run WHO's open learning platform, which has about 5 million course registrations and very active during COVID, obviously. And I'm also part of an initiative to create a global health emergency workforce. So all of these are really related, and I'm really, really happy to be here to talk in this panel and to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaia. And if we go to Bodo.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the panel. I'm coming from Vienna right now, so I'm in the city center very much. As to my background, I studied in Germany and Manchester, and then started to work for Deutsche Bank. There I mentioned them, and Procter & Gamble. Of course, afterwards, I saw the light. I became an academic. That's what happens when you see the light, you become an academic. And I started my very first academic job at the University of Edinburgh, then continued from there to the University of California at Berkeley, then across the channel again, back to the UK, University of Wales, where I got my first chair, my first full professorship, then again back to the US, to the Thunderbird, the American Graduate School of International Management, which is in Phoenix, Arizona. And then finally, I ended up here in Vienna, where I, on the one hand, had an Institute for International Marketing and Management, and secondly, also was the founding dean of the business school, which I headed for some 11 years. Oh yes, and very important, I think from my point of view at least, I'm the chair of AMBA. So given the fact that AMBA and BGA is our host, I'm chairing AMBA BGA, so I definitely need to mention that. And I'm delighted to be on that panel and delighted that it's such a high-powered panel.
Thank you, Bodo. That's great. And Lisa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elisaveta Nojkovska. I'm with Microsoft Education team, and I'm director for higher education in Central and Eastern Europe. Mainly, I'm focused on working with institutions, which means universities, faculties, but also ministries of education and national agencies or national bureaus for education in the countries. What we are doing in the last 2 years, we are focusing mostly on the students to upskill them, to try to make the digital literacy as a must for every student, because today, without any digital knowledge, it is like almost non-existing. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And it's honestly an honor to be in such an interesting group of people. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ehab, would you like to share?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, actually, I cannot compete with the introduction that has been done so far, but a little bit about myself. So my name is Ehab, and I lead the talent acquisition function for Africa, Middle East, and Turkey at Johnson & Johnson across the different three sectors that we have: the pharmaceutical, the medical devices, and the consumer sector. Lifelong education is a passion, like again for me as well. So I started as a pharmacist, was not a medical doctor, but a pharmacist within the healthcare space. But then I did my organizational business psychology degree with Liverpool, and now I'm doing my PhD in management. And yes, I would love to have a conversation with everyone. Corporates can collaborate with business schools on like upskilling the MBAs and like the postgrad students in order to find them opportunities that aligns with the how the businesses are growing and moving forward. So looking forward to that.
Thank you, Ehab. That's great. And Geraint.
Well, I'm pretty scared to go after that. I was just pleased to get off mute before I started talking. So hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Geraint Evans, MBA, or G as I'm more commonly known. So a little bit about me. My background is in marketing and digital. I've worked for companies like Odeon Cinemas Group, who Tesco's, Boots, and others. Also worked in a variety of not-for-profit and governmental roles as well. In terms of what I do these days, I'm an executive coach these days, so I help business leaders in their career, and also help people kind of through the challenges that obviously we're all experiencing at the moment. I am also editor-in-chief of an academic journal called The Bottom Line, and I write for platforms like Forbes and Entrepreneur and various other things. In terms of lifelong learning, I guess, yeah, as I say, I am an MBA. I did that after my PhD, so I guess it must show that I'm passionate about lifelong learning. But I'm really excited to be part of this esteemed panel today. Very humble to be on it, and humble to be speaking to all of you today. So yeah, look forward to hearing your questions and a great panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Geraint. That's great. And just a quick, very short intro to myself as well. So I'm Ivan Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Students Digital Education. It's a company that I founded a couple of years ago, but I also work as an associate professor at the University of East Anglia and an associate lecturer at the University of Cambridge. So sort of have one foot in the door of academia and one foot in the door of the private sector. So it's great to be here. And I think, as we sort of approach this topic, I'm sure lifelong learning is on the agenda, and change is clearly on the agenda. Very much we're in change, but this lifelong learning is on the agenda sort of throughout organizations across the world. And I think as a good opener, it would be good to start with, why we believe it's so important in the current climate and the climate going forward. And I wonder, Elisa, if you might be able to start us with that sort of, why is lifelong learning so important in the current climate?
Education never stops, and it never should stop, right? And if we discuss about lifelong learning, no matter how professional we are still students if we want to develop ourselves. So it's not about the current climate or the recent changes that happened. What I'm really satisfied about personally is that education didn't stop because of the situation that happened last year, right? It just got transformed. And honestly, maybe what happened is just a good catalyst, and it was a really speeded up process of education to get transformed. It is good from our side, the digital education or digital education to be this, because it will be much more accessible to international students. It will be much more accessible worldwide. So not only in one country or in the same country, different cities, but now much more easier for students abroad to access certain universities that are far away. And the students will save on travel, on accommodation. They can have the commodity of their home and still be students of a well-known university if they want to study. Now, this is maybe the bigger challenge we need to think about, the student dropout, right? And not the transformation of the learning, but how to keep the students still with the education plans, how to keep the students develop their knowledge and upgrade their skills, because it is not only needed to be part of a university, but studying and learning is much more important. I would like to hear the other panelists to share more, and I'm happy to speak more, but let's give them some space. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Yeah, so shall we open that up to everybody? Anyone else want to sort of come in on that?
I can actually share a personal story, actually picking up from what has been mentioned. So I mentioned that I did my my master's with Liverpool. This has been a 3-year online program. So the idea of, like, again, the digital transformation and how making sure that this learning is accessible is definitely is an enabler. And I was doing it completely remotely, and I never visited Liverpool. So which is a pity, but again, it's the you got the value of it. So I think part of it is the digital, but as well as looking at, like, the broader population who might benefit from that. So me as a corporate professional, for example, and there are lots of people who doesn't really pursue some degrees because of the fact that they cannot do it except full time, for example. So I've been struggling to find a PhD program that I can do on a part-time basis remotely, and it was very few. So the idea is it's as well as not only the way that we're delivering it, but as well as the formats. How can we consider the broader population? Because there is a huge value that a broader population of students can really get. And just talking about the lifelong learning, one of the competences that we look at as an organization, and when I talk to MDs or managing directors across the different sectors, they don't talk about technical skills. They talk about learning agility and how can you always learn, unlearn, and relearn new skills and new capabilities to be able to adapt to the like changing environment. So those are the two senses: the personal aspect as well as from an organization, this learning agility and the focus on that.
So Ivan, if I can jump in as well. I think it's really interesting to hear our own stories as well. And me too, I moved from profession to discipline. In my late 40s and early 50s, I managed to get 2 university degrees. I got trained as a coach, all while working more than full time. And as you know, I work in epidemics and pandemics, so very busy. But I think the bigger question is that the reality of the world, the universe, is that change is constant. And for many centuries, many decades, things moved much slowly. So formal education, school, universities were able to figure out what people would need in the real world. But now that has all sped up, partly because of the fourth industrial revolution, this massive proliferation of technological capability, and it's multiplying as we speak every second, but also the increase in biotech as well, which is changing the very nature of humans and societies. So I think change is fast and very profound. And what change requires is for us not to educate or train, but to learn, because the purpose of learning is application in real life. So I think that's the big thing. Also, our roles are changing. So I can pass out as a medical doctor or your graduates. The role evolves with time. You get different things to do, more responsible things to do, and so you are going to need, although you're academically qualified, this constant learning and the systems to support that. I think also our aspirations change, right? So in health, we are saying health for all. This is very different from let's vaccinate a few children. So our understanding of equity, human rights has changed our aspirations. And this requires learning, not just in our domains, but in a complex system. And that requires all of these new 21st century skills of communication, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. And also the means, the technology, and because we're collaborating, the means has changed. So all this necessitates constant learning, not just formally in schools and universities, but what we call informal learning. So we may go to a course or learn from in a webinar, but what we call non-formal, what we learn every day. So how are we learning back our experiences, codifying it, and sharing with others? So I think it's this whole complex system that makes lifelong learning, and that is, you know, from cradle to grave, really. And people are living longer. You know, we're going to have to continue to learn and adapt as we get older. In the health field, we have 250 million healthcare workers. We are missing 18 million doctors, nurses, and paramedical today. But within 10 years, we're going to have to reskill and upskill 100 million plus people in this, just in the formal sector, okay? So there is no choice. This is not a choice. It's great that we have a term for it. Now we have to figure out how to do it. So as you can see, this is not just about what we're passionate about. This is a necessity.
Can I just come in here? I think the question in a way breaks down into various parts. Number one is lifelong learning necessary? And I think convincing this panel or convincing anybody who is actually even tuned in here in the audience that lifelong learning is absolutely necessary, in particular in the digital vortex we find ourselves, where things are changing rapidly and more quickly than ever before. I think that's a given. So I think the more interesting part of the question is, how does the education industry and how do corporates respond to this? And note, I actually use the education industry specifically in order to point out that's more than the universities, more than the business schools as such, because now you have an ecosystem of providers, platforms like Coursera, platforms that were initially designed to do something completely different, like LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning, consulting companies that offer courses, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole range of institutions that offer various degrees of courses and various types of courses. And one also in this context has to be careful not to just equate lifelong learning with just another degree. I think another degree is always nice. I got my last degree when I was in my 40s. I decided to do a second doctorate, but it's neither here nor there. It's basically lifelong learning can be as short as a 5-minute podcast you listen to every lunchtime. And so I think the interesting question is, how do institutions actually manage and provide for lifelong learning opportunities? And how do corporations entice their employees to actually participate regularly in lifelong learning? I think these are the real key issues.
Thank you, Bodo. That's some really, I mean, there's some, and Guy and everybody, there's some really interesting insights. Cal, and you know, the argument for it, and also the how, and then the questions that we follow after that. I want us to have a quick think a little bit about what's the current state at the moment. You know, how are our employees actually looking at you know, and people across society? How are people actually perceiving and looking at continuous development and lifelong learning themselves? Ehab, do you want to come in and share any thoughts you might have on
absolutely. So basically it just so this lifelong learning, or what we call it like employee development, it is just continuous employee development with the different platforms, whether they are like whether it is formal education and formal classroom trainings, or what we call it on the job trainings, or accelerated development programs. All those are part of like the employee experience and employee journey that they are having inside the organization, that can help them deliver on their jobs, but as well as help them have the ammunition for the future roles as they are coming up as well. And it's very interesting because the roles that they are coming up now, there are many roles that they never existed in the past. So when you look at, for example, a very basic example like e-commerce, for example, when you look at someone who's leading an e-commerce function, 10, 15 years ago, there's not been like an e-commerce function or a digital function or a design function. So the idea is how to make sure that this education as well is not only sufficient but is relevant as well, not only for now but as well as for the future. So those are like my 2 cents here.
If I can speak from the public sector, so we have staff in 155 countries, and we work with governments, and we've done a lot of research within the organization, but also with external stakeholders. Everybody's hungry for this and this is fueled by need to solve problems, need to get skills and competencies. People notice what we're saying. I mean, we are sitting here as an expert panel. This is the reality of people's lives. Particularly my organization, we're full of doctors who have technical skills, but that managerial leadership is really difficult. And when you are so qualified as my colleagues and I, it's very difficult for us to say, well, actually, we don't know how to do that. So I think there's a great appetite for this. But the issue is, as Bodo was saying, what are the mechanisms and how do we do this? And I see this on many levels, at the very political level. So at the moment, an organization like WHO, we have leadership who say, yes, we are going to do this. But an incentive is to link learning with career pathways. So if you're looking at employees, of course they want to learn, but they also want to be recognized, assessed, and to help them move into new responsibilities, get different experiences, and so on. So I think there's an energy behind all of that. But then there are lots of people who are not employees, who contribute to changing the world for the better, who are actually kept outside of all of this. And I think we have to understand that we are really in a social organizations, really has to be aligned to the world outside and how we are as citizens and mothers and sisters and daughters and so on. So I think there is a policy aspect of it. There's a very big social aspect of it. The whole conversation has been hijacked by technology and online learning, online learning and technology is a tool. It cannot be the end all and be all, and we cannot equate lifelong learning with e-learning or online learning or virtual learning. So we can't have the tool become the master, and that's exactly relevant for MBAs. They have to think, what is the role of technology in all of this? And the other thing from employees, if you like, the big 2 things is their supervisors either don't acknowledge that they need to continuously learn, or they themselves feel ashamed, if you like, to admit they don't know something. And the other physical factor is time. Everybody is getting increasing work all the time. And in an organization like mine, everything is life and death. So how do you carve out that time? So in my consultations, those are some of the big things that I have seen. Money is not a problem. There are billions of dollars in this industry. It's about how we use the money, who gets it for what purpose. So we're not talking about generating new funds, but how it is used in a strategic way.
Gaia, thank you for that. Some really interesting questions. I'm going to pick up on one of your points there in a moment around this sort of question around what skills are, that are missing perhaps in various realms, or that we want to focus on. But before we do that, Geraint, if I could bring you in just to sort of give your perspective, as a writer, particularly on that bigger picture as well, around what's the voice? Do you perceive the voice as the from the employee angle on continuous development and learning, lifelong learning?
Well, look, I think one thing that we're all seeing, has been pointed to from the different panelists here, is that this period of change we're in has just accelerated beyond anyone's expectations, right? Like, I'm not going to use the word unprecedented, although I just did, but what we've seen in the last year, for all the reasons that we know, we've seen, and I've characterized this in several discussions and podcasts, is, the kind of feature has arrived early, really. From, if I was sitting here a year ago, giants in the world had fully remoted their workforce, and some setting no expectations that they would ever return to their physical offices, we wouldn't really have believed a word that I was saying, right? And again, it's pointed to from some of the other panelists, if we if we reflect on what's about to happen to us with AI, with the advent of what 5G can do in terms of connectivity, how our cities will become smart, how our vehicles will become autonomous, all of these realities, including getting to Mars, no doubt, very, very soon. This is all of our world right now. So the reason I start with that is that that's the context in which a lot of people are either working in or entering the field of work at the moment. So there is a lot of uncertainty about the future of work and what it might look like based on all of those things. And honestly, I think very, very little time and focus has actually been really looked at the implications for work and jobs that might create, particularly by AI, and what that might mean for traditional jobs. Now, it's not all negative from the learner's perspective. You know, AI again will bring a whole new category of jobs that we can't understand right now. You know, the idea of empathy trainers that help the AI understand how to be more human, or whatever it might be. There's a whole new world coming our way, but it's coming our way within years. So what we have to do in terms of supporting lifelong learning is the challenge, really, us as academics, you know, educators, you know, people who run business schools. We have to act right now and obviously focus on the fundamentals as we understand them, the traditional models that, you know, hopefully are still valid in many cases that can be taught, but we also have to understand that the change is happening right in front of our eyes. So where this naturally leads us to, in my view, is a much more bigger emphasis on digital skills. I know it sounds almost quite trite to say it to some extent, but again, there's very little relative focus on growth in that area compared to what's happening in the world and the things I point to. And I think finally, and perhaps, you know, it's been highlighted by even some of the panelists here, such as Ehab talking about his own PhD experience. I think academic institutions and all the different types of learning institutions, they really need to wake up to the reality of this world. They need to offer the flexibility that incredible candidates like you're hearing about here, who want to do a PhD remotely, but yet struggle to find schools that are willing to support them on that. And yet they're, you know, clearly, you know, one of some of the finest minds in the world. We can't carry on like that, right? You know, because of the reasons that Bodo has said and Gaia has mentioned, you know, that it's not just about traditional learning now. There are many, many other ways that people can learn. So there's quite a complex web of learning opportunities. So for business schools particularly, I believe they just need to react to this current reality and almost wake up to it and support that flexibility in learning that is essential. You know, just finally, you know, the idea that people can just take 2 days off from work on a given schedule from the business school anymore. We can't carry on like that. You know, the idea that people have to give up weekends when that may not suit their life anymore, that, you know, that these things are concepts that a lot of our education is built on at the moment, and really we need to adapt, and business schools in particular need to offer far more flexibility and realize that it's 2021. And you know, I know a lot of them are, and I'm sure a lot of the people viewing this session today are absolutely on the front foot in terms of flexibility, but I'm just talking for the industry as a whole there. I just think it's essential that we accelerate in all areas.
Thanks.
Can I just come in on that, because you addressed business schools in particular? I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And as far as that, we see from a student's point of view, in particular the adult student's point of view, they want to learn when, where, and how it best suits them, not us. So the idea of, you know, getting up early in the morning to find a parking space in the city somewhere and find a business school and go there is not necessarily very convenient and doesn't really fit the lifestyle of most people. So business schools, I think, have to become more flexible in two ways. Number one, in terms of delivery, giving people a lot of delivery options for the content they're producing. And secondly, also in terms of their focus, because, and this perhaps in a different way, number one, in terms of the focus, because a lot of business schools sort of think in the past that with the graduation, even, you know, MSc graduation, PhD graduation, so that's it. They are no more our customer. So the alumni work was in a way an afterthought in a way. Can we possibly get the alumni to devote to give them some money at one stage, or get one in to give a talk or something like this? That's so wrong, because at the moment we really look, as Gaia said very correctly, from a cradle to the grave education, and we have to address this kind of population, this kind of customers, in a very, very different way. So I think that for business schools is definitely the biggest challenge at the moment.
And Bodo, if I can just like expand on that, like the term terminal degree, it just like is very opposite to a lifelong learning. So even from a terminology perspective, I think we need to revisit that.
Thanks, Ehab. Thanks, Bodo. Yeah, some really interesting insights there, and these issues sort of that are very much on the forefront of a lot of people's minds in business schools. Just going to dive in now, taking it one step further around the actual in the practice side of what's happening. And you know, I think Gaia, you raised a number of points there, and I think that we want to sort of perhaps expand on and sort of delve a bit further into in this role of what are the skills, you know, in general, but also specifically perhaps to certain sectors and you know, business school graduates maybe as well, but you know, MBA graduates. But what are the skills that perhaps missing from the workplace in the current environment? Guy, you sort of you kind of phrased that the future has arrived early, and I think Elisa, you mentioned this earlier as well. Sort of actually, we've accelerated the transformations that were already on course to happen. You know, but I want to sort of this debate around technical or social, emotional, softer skills type things. What's going on there? So I wonder, Elisa, if we could go to you and sort of get your perspective on that.
Thanks. I liked what Dr. Gaia mentioned when she said it's not only the formal education or formal learning, but also the informal one. So the informal might be some courses, informal might be what we hear on daily basis, informal might be some investigation we do or some research that we do, right? But we learn all the time. Now, what we have as a model in the last 2 years, what we are doing while working with institutions, which are mainly higher institutions, we are upskilling not only the students, but also the professors, the educators, the staff over there. But at the same time, in a parallel way, we are also working with commercial companies. We work with our partners. So the students that get upskilled in a university will then be employed by our commercial companies. And then the companies who are the future employers will recognize the students that have been in this path of technology readiness and technology knowledge. How we are helping them is actually we are developing different types of curriculums together with universities regarding technology, regarding artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. But then on the markets and online also, you can find different vendors, IT vendors and software vendors offering different types of trainings and learning, but also certificate. Now, the certificate is something like diploma in some countries or verification of the knowledge, because it's not important only to have to give the students the knowledge, but also to apply the knowledge further. So it's not only about learning, but also applying the knowledge further and developing yourself and developing the community or even a larger community in the country. We are developing this model and we call it closing the gap or connecting the dots. So from one side, we are educating the students, but then we are helping them become future workforce or employees, right? And we see as a trend, many employers are now having as a criteria for new members or for new candidates when they do interviews, they have digital skills. So different types of surveys that I can read about in the last months, there are like top 10 skills or top 5 skills or top 20 skills. Probably one of the most important would be presentation skills. So a person needs to present them or to learn how to present either an important report or to present some important knowledge or important project. Second one would be public speaking or how to have oral skills and to be ready to talk about publicly, because there are different types that they need to overcome to be ready for a public speaking. And the third one would be digital skills. So knowledge of using computer, knowledge of being there online, and to learning how to develop more. When I say digital skills, it is something in our industry, I will say, but also education part of the IT industry. With these skills and certificates that are offered, we feel that the individual who has these skills, the digital skills, there are three main benefits. One benefit would be that they will be outstanding in their community, in their environment. Second one is that they will be recognized as somebody who is skilled in a certain matter. And third is that everybody who has these informal, let's say, skills or certificates for their knowledge is much highly to receive increased salary between 20 and 30% more. So it is about the educating and developing yourself more and more and further, and being in trends, because education cannot stop only with university or with MBA, right? The technology is changing, as we mentioned at the beginning, environment is changing, tools are changing. So keeping up with the trends is something that needs to be a norm, and being flexible and being adjustable to the current situation is something that will help out everyone be upskilled.
Ivan, if I can jump in, it's really interesting, and I know I'm the odd one out, and if I can be provocative, I think if you look over the last 200-300 years, almost every institution, everything that we experience has changed, travel, but there are two institutions or two industries that haven't changed. They're almost the same: our religious institutions and our education institutions. Okay, you really, there are evolutions, but it is not as drastic as you need it to be. And current university education produces and certifies knowledge. But there is still a lot of learning, as Elisa said, to move into application, applicability, what is required for the real world. So if I take in public health, we hire MBAs. Yeah, we hire MBAs. So they have a particular struggle because they don't understand public health. And they're products of usually private education, where education is also a commodity with a price, right? So all of these things are right, it's okay, but we still have to help people make that shift. There are parts of education that is a social good. What part is that? How do you turn education into competency in different contexts? So these are the questions that we are struggling with. And of course, you don't have a model, where we say everything is free, go and hug a tree. This is not what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to connect with each other. So looking at how we look at education, including degrees. And I was lucky, I did 2 master's degrees while I was working because there was flexibility in the health and sector because they need me to get that. So they offer that, right? For MBAs, they need to also have a bridge where they understand the sector in which they're going into, the social values of that sector, and then how they can continue to grow. So instead of, we have a product, we have graduates, and as Boda was saying, we work with alumni. How do we create the social connections where when alumni come back, they're talking about real world experience and everybody's interested in being part of this network? So going to the skills, the 21st century skills, I think Elisa talked about them. A lot will be around communication. We are in a social age. It will be the different aspects of communication, how you can synthesize something, communicate something, but more often influence and convince others to do something. It is about this ambiguity and change. So you need not just critical thinking skills, but you need to have graduates who are actually comfortable in ambiguity and comfortable. And this is very difficult to teach, right? But to be comfortable in ambiguity, in options, scenario-based planning, things like that. Creativity, can be in every aspect of our life and needs to be. But really the skill that everybody needs is collaborative skills, right? So I think even in my organization, we depended a lot on consultants and external companies, the big companies you work with. We're finding that we spend a lot of money and it is no longer, the solutions that we are given are not relevant to us. So how can experts from this sector work with the content and context experts, that's us, and how can we co-create solutions that are right for us, not sell a package that, great companies give great packages, but we can't use them. They stay on the shelves. So these are, I think, the skills. And you talked about technical versus emotional intelligence. Absolutely. There is nothing soft about emotional intelligence. It's damn hard to become emotionally intelligent in your private life, in your workplace, in your social networks, right? And I spend most of my leadership training focusing not on technical skills, but on emotional intelligence, right? But remember, I'm Generation X, I don't know what you are, but in 10, 20 years, most of the workforce will be millennials and Generation Z and whatever name we give to the next generation. They learn in completely different ways. They want flatter structures. They don't care for the bureaucracy and the pride, the false, useless pride we have in our educational qualifications. They don't care, right? They look for loyalty. They look for flexibility. Boundaries have disappeared. So geographical boundaries have disappeared. So what Elisa said, you need agreed certification or accreditation. So somebody in Bangalore can get a job in Pretoria if they want. It's not necessarily south-north, it's south-south as well. So without some sort of competency assessment and agreement, but not necessarily of a degree, but smaller chunks of applicable knowledge. And that's what I think business schools can do. You could offer smaller chunks of applied management skills that would also bring a portion of those people back into doing an MBA because they see, oh, these 4 chunks are really interesting. Maybe I go back and get a full degree. So this is not about marketing your courses. This is about being relevant to the person who's using it. And really, they're not students anymore because we're all learners. I warned you at the beginning, I talk a lot and I love this topic. So you need to turn my mic off. I'll stop here.
Can I just come in and defend the universities and the business schools a little bit? While I agree a lot with what Gaia said and what Lisa was saying before, I think you should not underestimate the change which has been going on within business schools and within universities. Number one, first point is there is no typical business school or no typical university because we have a huge variety. Sometimes they are government institutions, sometimes business schools are embedded in universities, sometimes they are self-standing, and so there is a huge variety, number one. And that has changed, and that is basically the composition of the industry which has changed. Secondly, what we teach and what most business schools teach is changing dramatically in as far as that now, and this is very much what you said actually, and I'm very much in agreement, is now going beyond profit. So what I call profit plus, because as you think about the triple bottom line, profit, people, and planet, most students are now also very much focusing on social issues, on CSR issues, on sustainability issues, etc., and they want to learn more about it. In terms of these chunks which we offer, and you're promoting them very much, this is done. This is done. Think about, for example, the American Marketing Association, and I mentioned them because I'm a professor of marketing. They now offer chunks of 5 minutes, which you can tune in regularly to basically update a certain topics. And then, of course, if you want to have more depth, you can continue, etc. This is something you can get certified. You basically have these so-called stackable certificates, etc. So the education industry, with all due respect, Gaia, has moved and is moving quite a lot. We use artificial intelligence in some business schools, not everywhere, to basically work out what we should offer students in terms of looking at their expectation, looking at their prior knowledge before they come into an MBA, and looking at their career path in order to try and individualize as much as possible what we can offer. We offer virtual reality in order to basically show students how, let's say, you mentioned Bangalore, a shopping street in Bangalore would look like, and so on and so forth. So a lot of these kind of demands you put out are actually done. Now, I admit it is not throughout and everywhere. You know, there are leading business schools, there are good business schools, there are strong brands who have changed a lot, and there are also business schools who don't, and they presumably go out of the market sooner or later, which is a good thing. But overall, I would not underestimate the capability of the education industry in terms of having embraced change.
So if I had underestimated, I wouldn't be discussing this with you. What I'm saying is only 30% of African men have access to broadband internet. Only 20% of African women have that. So you basically have, and we, you and I, basically live in a world where great business schools are concentrated and exclusive, frankly, in terms of cost, digital access, in terms of language, in terms of flexibility of time. Women are free caregivers. They obviously, they do a job, they take care of their family, and then they want to study. So unless we want to address equity and to get our business schools to represent the reality of the world and address real world problems, we have not moved far enough. That was my point. I'm working with the education industry, and I appreciate the exceptions prove the point. There are great exceptions, but this is concentrated. It is not scaled up. It is not equitable. And frankly, Bodo, when I want a management expert to work in a peripheral health unit in Malawi, I can't find one because the context has not even been addressed. So when we talk about this, we're talking about the well-being of nearly 8 billion people now, right? So not just about an exclusive group of cutting edge, I agree, cutting edge thinking. The challenge is how to scale this up and make it equitable. And that's really, I think, my point. My point isn't yes or no. We live in a very complex world, and really all respect to the education industry. But as we move forward in this age, we have an opportunity to shift, pivot a little bit, to also look at equity issues, relevance issues, context issues, and to figure out who's excluded and why. So that was really the point. So
absolutely, completely with you, and entirely agree. Just one final point to that, and otherwise we drift the conversation too much into this one dialogue here. When we talk about equity, it is not only the business schools and the universities. You have to start with primary education. I mean, you mentioned Bangalore and India. Look at India. About 50% of the rural female population in India can't read or write. And that is a crime. That is a crime. And unless these basic skills are provided, there is little which business schools can do. You know, you can have the IIMs of Calcutta or Ahmedabad or the Indian School of Management of Business or whatever, but they need some prerequisites in order to scale this up. And so if you are putting this on such a broad basis, we really need to talk about primary education as well.
Thank you, Bodo and Gaia. And actually, it's healthy to have these dialogues to sort of tease out the sort of, you know, questions and issues within that. So thanks for sharing your insights there. I want to keep going a little bit on around, you know, on the theme of the MBAs sort of and the business school community, just for a moment, and then we'll go more generic again. But yeah, I mean, just let's go to Ehab if we can. You know, when it comes to the, you know, corporate organizations, I mean, what are the things that you're really looking for in MBA graduates in particular in terms of the skills, and is there a real shift around whether there's a, you know, do you care a lot about the content of what they've studied, where they've studied, or what skills they can demonstrate afterwards, and And again, you know, are you thinking a lot along these lines of micro credentials, micro qualifications, again, that are quite applied outside of that? What's the perspective from you?
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. And again, while actually the business school can give you some insights about like what is the quality of the content, and there are lots of accreditation bodies that can come and say that this is the best business schools and so on, but it doesn't always work that way, because not necessarily the best business school have the best talents that are relevant to you. And again, come back here to the element of relevancy, to what we are looking at and what are the qualities in terms of like a content, for example, that it is relevant to us, as well as the ones who are aspiring to work with us as an organization. And I'm talking about all the organizations that I worked for. So just like an example, in my previous organization, Harvard was not a target school, because again, the experience with Harvard graduates in the past years, when we looked at the data, was not like the highest, if you will. So this is definitely one. The second one, again, I will not repeat what the esteemed colleagues mentioned about like the qualities, but again, the qualities are primarily soft qualities versus technicalities. But what I would love actually to expand on from the previous conversation, and I would like to take from what Guy mentioned around the co-creation of content. So till now, I think there is a gap between making sure that corporates are playing a more of an active role in developing the curricula that the students are going through. And there is lots of appetite within organizations, and as well as lots of real examples and situations and case studies that you can just inject into the curricula that brings the students much closer to the real world. And then when they are discussing those with the organizations, they have this real, real life feel. And you can inject as well the social impact, the value that you can bring when you join a specific industry or a specific group. So I think if we can shift the needle on that, if the universities would be flexible to reach out to organizations, to bring them into the table, say that, look, this is the curriculum. Is it relevant? Is it still serving the purpose that you are having? Is it addressing the challenges that you are having within your organization? Would you like to weigh it differently, for example? So less weight on that, but higher weight on that. Topics like, for example, sustainability and green energy, and how, again, this is on the agenda of each and every single corporate now. Is it a very solid part that people are having insights on during their education, so they can bring this value when they come in? I think that this is the question, and I just leave it as a food for thought. How can we move the needle there?
Ehab, thank you ever so much on that. That's really great. Geraint, do you want to come in as well on that?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I was just very excited by what Ehab went through there. I think the irony of this somewhat is that there's no lack of demand from the students themselves to hear and work in the way that Ehab just described. And I really liked it. About 24 minutes ago, when I think it was when Boda referred to customers as well. Like, we can't forget as academic practitioners and also business practitioners that the students are customers, right? So therefore, we have to cater to their needs and their wants and their demands. And the thing that I hear consistently, absolutely consistently, and again, not all courses, not all institutions, all the caveats apply, but I consistently hear exactly what Ehab has mentioned. Frustrations about use of case studies from 2006 and 7 and 8. No reference to changes that significantly changed that academic area. I know that in terms of in lieu of sustainability, an area that I do a lot of work in, it's incredible how that's still taught in the tone of CR and CSR. Those are the taught modules around anything related to sustainability today, with no reference to what's happened in the last 5 years. So that's not every school, but it's it's something that we need to address really rapidly. Working with companies in the way that you have described is key. And, you know, companies have to step up as well. They have to be willing for their data to be shared, to share their own insights, share their own case studies, things that I know are often very hard from a confidentiality perspective, but certainly, you know, things that are in the public domain, you know, companies must be encouraged to engage with those. And that's the key to unlocking lifetime learning for so many students. You know, so many students are put off by the lack of contemporary information and updated academic models. And there's a thought that, you know, the students don't, you know, we don't really talk about what the students feel about this too much, but I can tell you, you know, just in my own sample of my own kind of global cohort that I work with myself in terms of coaching and education, is that that's the thing I hear again and again. What you have mentioned is, why are you not talking about what's happening right now? Why are you not getting us ready for the next 10 years? You know, why are you still referring to models from the 1980s that clearly have no relevancy to the current, you know, digital economy? All these things are coming from the students. So if we listen to them, react to them, and give them what they want, then that will actually also support lifelong learning, because they'll want to carry on learning. So this can all work together if we just start listening as institutions and academic professionals. I think it's just kind of somewhat ironic that we don't, based on the fact that, you know, we're supposed to be all about discovery of knowledge, right? So I think that's a key starting point to this.
I want to add on.
Can I sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So the speed, you know, because academic institutions have great approaches for quality, you know, for really understanding what a credit is, but the development process of curricular material is quite long in our traditional system, right? This is a challenge. Last year, so my own experience is, I have the declaration of an epidemic or pandemic. I have 72 hours to get information, just knowledge transfer out there, right? In the last year, we've developed 100 courses in 44 languages, right? So the speed is different in an academic institution. And that, I think, Bodo, is one of the things I was saying, that because of rigor, you're balancing rigor with speed. But today, because the world is changing so fast, we have to have rigor and have speed. And what Gerant and Ehab said is exactly that. So it's not current. I did an MPH master in public health, and I was shocked. Much of the curriculum and the materials I featured in it, or I had developed it in the last 10 years, and I was sitting there consuming outdated material that I had developed 10 years ago, and somebody's charging an arm and a leg for this kind of thing, right? So but this is just the nature of rigor and the processes for rigor. But this is the kind of shaking up we need, even in the MBA. While you have rigor, how can you have that flexibility for peer learning, co-created learning, using examples from today, right? You talked about digital literacy, but in addition to digital literacy, there is a movement talking about environmental and health literacy, together with digital literacy and the STEM subjects in primary, secondary, and beyond, for all citizens, right? So I think it's really important not to, yes, absolutely talk about corporate social responsibility, because the millennials really care. Apparently they care more than my generation about what we're doing to this planet. So giving it as an extra add-on is not the point. Is how do you embed this in the value system of whether it's a small chunked up course or the whole MBA? And I think those were the big changes and the big gaps I feel on the receiving end of organizations that need MBAs to really help solve problems of humanity. So I think the last two really helped me also clarify what really presses my buttons about this. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Again, lots of agreement. I would like to make an argument here for accreditation, for AMBA, because when we visit business schools, one of the things we ask is, how does your advisory board look like? Do you have people from Johnson & Johnson, from Microsoft, or from any other leading companies on your advisory board? And what kind of contributions do they make? First question. Secondly, what kind of projects are you doing with these companies? Do you have, for example, incubation centers set up where you work with alumni or with outsiders and the companies in order to co-create something new. The co-creation was mentioned. It's very, very important. So essentially, I think certainly the accreditation body, certainly AMBA, is very well aware of the needs. And one of the first things we do is when we visit business schools, is to actually look at how close the relationship is between the business school and the business community in which they are embedded, and also in particular how international their work is, because that's another dimension we haven't really explored, but it's becoming more and more relevant. Are the students trained to work internationally across time zones with different cultures? Are they getting some kind of insights in terms of how to communicate? I remember projects which still ongoing, essentially, which put together the Carlson School of Management in Minneapolis, then the Indian School of Business, and us. And China. And so one of the issues was that we put student teams together that came from different cultures, and they worked with companies in order to, for example, prepare a market entry strategy or something like this, which was challenging enough. But the funny things about this, and here a little bit of an anecdote, was always the reaction of the students. Why can't I reach the Chinese students? Well, because it's Chinese New Year. Oh, I didn't think about it, you know, and the Chinese, of course, never thought about telling everybody that this is our Chinese New Year and you won't be reaching us for the next week. Or think about, I don't know, Christmas or any other religious holidays which were not on the radar screen. Different ways of communication. Some cultures tend to be relatively, let's say, outspoken and direct in terms of criticizing. Others are not, etc. So it was all the soft skills which was going on, which was really, really interesting in these projects. But coming back to my original argument, accreditation bodies and AMBA in particular, that's one of the first things we look for, is how your advisory board looks like, how you cooperate, and what kind of projects are you doing with industry.
Thanks, Bodo. That's really, really great to share that, mechanism that AMBA has in place there. Guy, can I come back to you and just pick up on a theme that you've mentioned, and it sort of relates back to Epad's point about this sort of collaboration across sectors and between the university and the business school communities and you know, public institutions like WHO. What sort of collaboration, you know, in very practical terms, do you see offering the most benefit in that space? What does that sort of look like to you?
So I think the principle of any collaboration is understanding each other and understanding each other's values and finding that common thing that we can work on. And that requires exposure, right? So it's quite unusual. I mean, for me, this is an educational process because I'm with a group that I don't usually talk to. I can just complain about MBA graduates or say, oh, this one is an exception. But I think this is part of the dialogue, that we have a lot more interaction. And the best way that human beings do anything is they have a conversation. You can call it a debate or a webinar or an argument, but it doesn't matter, where we listen to each other in different perspectives, but with an open mindset. I think that's one, but we can formalize that. We can formalize that because we, particularly we come from the medical profession that has, you know, that is, if you like, informing the health sector. And in the medical profession, internships, placements, exchanges, this is part of learning. I'm from very old-fashioned learning. You know, you see one, what is it? You see one, you do one, you teach one. So learning something requires you to teach it too. So having exchanges, we have many universities that have agreements with us where they visit us, and now we do this virtually, where we share. So people want to know what is the value system, what is the context, and we do have management students, some you know, who come to us. So I think we have a whole center that organizes that. We could do that. That could be just an eye-opener, an introduction. And it's a dialogue. Then we talk to the students and we talk about their aspirations, because you find more and more younger people, they want to be part of a purpose. They want to contribute to something while using their skills and while getting a decent life, and earning a decent living. So I'm really motivated by that. And I think one thing we could do concretely is that kind of exchange where people can learn about us, we can learn about them. And I'm sure many of your MBAs, and I'm seeing some of the questions, they want to know then what's missing, because many people identify with a great course. So I think that's one thing we could do. Another thing we could do is, and just following up with the dialogue with Bodo, is maybe, just presenting some of the challenges we have that MBAs could contribute to, either through their education or placement, or, having a lab where we, I don't know, the technology allows us to do so much, but practical problems in the front line. We really have a big gap for management leadership thinking in health systems delivery. This is a really big problem, right? It's so we could have that practical collaboration. And then I think third, we actually can have secondments, but not from for-profit organizations. But if we can figure out that mechanism, we can have exchanges. Also, I think our technical experts would really benefit, from those smaller chunked but accredited, as Bodo said, accredited courses that would really expand their ability to have an impact. So I can think of leadership cohorts that I'm in charge of, if we could discuss some curriculum for a certified course done at a reasonable or as part of your non-profit activities. And then we could see how that goes. And you could, at the same time, use that and put that into your curriculum and have the necessary profit making that is required to sustain innovation and capacity development. So I would really be very open. And that's why, although this is not natural for me, I'm in this conversation because I see a solution here, but we have to be very open about what's wrong. In order to go forward and co-create, we have to have a shared understanding of the situation and find a core value, just one that we can agree on. I'm really interested because I see this as a big gap in health and public health, less so in hospitals because there are more formal systems, but in the broader public health world. And now you see in the health emergencies, the scale at which we require this, right? Everybody I train, I'm training in management and leadership, not in technical skills. So there is such a big market, and I would really appreciate the support of this community and your expertise. So I suppose that's my wish. I can see something concrete. I understand we have to invest in it too, but these complex problems can only be addressed through co-creation. There is no one entity or one sector that can manage the problems of this century, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Gaia. That's really insightful, and appreciate you sharing that. Just want to sort of, as we come into land now, the next sort of 5-10 minutes, start thinking a little bit about looking forward to the future and what we think that holds for this space of lifelong learning in particular, and our views on that. And we've talked a lot about some of the issues that are existing both in society throughout the world in general in terms of skills and learning areas, but also some of the challenges of the sort of cross-pollination of how we make that happen. Obviously we're in a context now, but I mean, just looking to the future, what's people's views on are we optimistic about what's going to happen? What's the expectation in this domain? Yes, sort of recognizing that predicting the future is an impossible task, but Geraint, I'm glad you smiled. So if I can come to you, because you obviously have that wider sort of view as a writer. What's your thoughts on what we expect moving forward in the realm of work and learning in this?
I think I'm always optimistic and always excited, about the future. I think as Guy just mentioned, we can't pretend this isn't a difficult moment for us globally in so many different ways, and it's got even more difficult over the last year for obvious reasons. And there are fundamental points that we need to address, such as access to education for all. We're all aligned on that. If we can just start to make progress on that in the way that, again, that my colleagues have mentioned, then I think the future is extremely bright. I think the use of some of the applications and tools that we've talked about, the idea of how AI is already being used practically, as Bodo mentioned. We're not even like a nano, whatever you want to call it, nano centimeter or whatever it is, nanometer. We're not even begun on the AI journey, right? It's going to absolutely transform how we can live our lives. Where I hope it goes, and certainly I don't kind of want to take this down as sort of universal basic income route, because we're definitely going to time out if I do that. But I'm extremely hopeful about the future. I think there'll be hopefully more time for people to learn. I hope there'll be an ever-growing appetite to learn. I'm definitely sensing it personally that and again, it's ironic in all of this discussion how little we've actually talked about the students. It's that almost none of us have really touched on that, but from my perspective, I see a huge appetite to learn from so many different angles in so many different ways. So I think if we can all work together to harness that potential, maybe try to address some of our systemic issues really quickly, and put sustainability at the heart of absolutely everything we do, sustainability in all literal senses and actual and factual ways. That's the key to this. But if we don't wake up to that possibility, then I think there's nothing but negativity and doom and gloom in the future, honestly, as this technology begins to take over our lives. But I for my part of it, I'm optimistic that we are just starting to wake up in an appropriate way. We're not waking up as fast as we need to, for the reasons that Guy has stated so eloquently. But yeah, I think in short, I'm very optimistic that now is the moment for us to really start to move this forward, because the world is. We think it's different now. I'm sure we're all clear on this ourselves, but we will not recognise this our lives in 10 years' time. It will bear very little resemblance to our current life. That's 10 years away, maybe even 5. So we have to get ready for it.
Thanks, Geraint. And Ehab, do you want to tell us your thoughts looking forward? What do you see as the opportunities, challenges, and things sort of as we move forward over the next few years?
Absolutely. So am I optimistic? Definitely I am. And the fact that we're having this dialogue today with like everyone on the table sharing their views and ideas makes me even more optimistic and confident about what we're going to achieve in the future. I think if we manage to crack into the areas that we mentioned, we call it inside organization cross-functional collaboration. I think this is a sector and cross-industry collaboration for the greater good. I think if we manage to work on that, and as Bodo mentioned, there are lots of great work that started to happen. How can we look at this and lift and shift into the other areas where they are still lagging behind, and bring them into the same level? And from a skills and capabilities, I saw a question around that. What are the things that we are seeing very appreciated? So we mentioned many of them. One of them as well that I would like to add is just the area of experimentation, and just failing fast, failing forward, and learning from this failures and how to drive that. And while you guys are not publishers, but one of the key gaps that I personally see in the literature is that there is people shy away from publishing, those hypotheses that were not confirmed. So I would love to see this refuted hypotheses in management review, for example. So I think this will be great, because then people will not be just reinventing the wheel. We are just we are proud of those failures. We are presenting this as a knowledge for people, telling them this didn't work. Don't spend your time and effort on that. And I think organizations will really appreciate that.
Thank you, Ehab. Thanks for sharing that. Elisa, are you optimistic about the coming 18 months?
Very much, Ivan. But I would like to just give my view of some of the previously mentioned from Gaia and from Bodo. I loved when she said we need MBAs to help solve human problems. An amazing sentence and very powerful one. And we need to work together. All of us here, I suppose we are all influencing our communities, our companies, or the however I can say the entities that we represent, but we need to have a strong message together and we need to address further. I love the conversation today. There is a variety of opinions and focus points and views. So from one side, we see countries where there is poverty and not able to start education at all. From the other side, we are talking about AI and cloud and something, right? So probably the discussion can be even broader and even longer. But we also need to take some steps and to start changing the things. Bodo mentioned about accreditation, and this is something that I also would like to mention as well, because the institutions and the universities need to open their doors much more frequently. It doesn't in their advisory boards. So when they're thinking about the teaching plans of the students, when they're thinking about the curriculums, they also need to have somebody from the other vendors, not necessarily Microsoft or other company, right? But they need to have the trends on the market and they need to start thinking and implementing this. Sometimes we are facing closed, let's say, institutions who think that the current plans are already there and are enough, but it seems that it is not enough. They need to follow the trends. Everything is changing. They need to be, you know, on the same pace and on the same step how the world is evolving. It's not about only having that for 10 years and that's it. They need to be much more open. They need to implement other things. We see sometimes universities come to us and they say, would you like to develop together a curriculum on certain technology or AI or machine learning? Other universities say, we desperately need digital skills. What I like is that now on the markets, it is much more visible that institutions see that they need skills and they need to offer the students some skilling programs. On the other side, employees are also very awake and they understand and recognize the needs for skills. From one side, employers say that there is a gap on the market. The students coming from the universities are not ready, but they are also 66% of the employers are ready to invest in the skills of their candidates and their employees. And I'm with you, Gaia, when you say there is budget, there is money, right? We discussed it already. It is about to use it and how to invest it. It is not about being expensive or being, you know, not available. And it is there. It is available. It exists. Many of the programs you can find online are free of charge. Many of the products and platforms are there. You just go online and you can find them. And we mentioned these are the tools. Let's see what is going on with the knowledge. Yeah, we can speak about this. I see for long.
Can I add my optimism? May I add my optimism? So I'm a realist. I'm optimistic about the vision and our ability to get there, but I'm very realistic about the things that we must overcome to get there. So I'm also optimistic because I'm the mother of 2 millennials. And when I see them and the way they think and their friends and their cohorts, it's a different world. It really, all the possibilities are there. You know, Gerard, you were saying we didn't talk about students. I don't talk about students. I talk about learners, all of us being learners, right? But they also don't see themselves as students. They see agency. They see responsibility. And if you don't give them what they want, they'll go somewhere else and find it. They don't care. They don't care if it's not credited. Right? They don't care if it costs money. So I really think I'm very confident because of that. But I'm most confident because I think the changes we have today allow us to draw on the basic things that humanity drew on to go from being a wild animal to our civilization, right? So what is that? That's our amazing intellect. We have the biggest brain of any living being proportioned to our body, but that means amazing creativity when we see problems. So not education for the sake and the pleasure of learning about things and knowing about things, but really to apply to issues like our survival, like climate change, like health, like pandemics. The second is human beings became so successful because we could collaborate. We were very tribal, but somehow we realized if we stay in groups of 150, we will be extinct. So we started to collaborate, right? So that collaboration in the social age is a skill, and it's a process, and it is an output, right? It's all of those things. The next is we use tools very well, right? We got the opposable thumb and we developed tools. Technology is a tool, I'm sorry, right? So we need to become masters of this tool and use it with our value system. And the other thing is, like, we take care of each other, humans. We take care of the weak. We take care of the poor. We take care of the sick. We bury our dead. We don't just leave it out there. So I think this social age, you know, with our connectivity, allows us to draw on that fundamental humanity that we have and to address these problems. Right. So I'm really, as you can see, I'm into anthropology and politics and all of these things. But I think that's how we have to think. We have to be very holistic, think outside our domain, listen and learn about those things. So I'm extremely optimistic, and I'm optimistic that, you know, you allowed me to be on this panel and say what I like. So I think this is a sign of openness as well. So thank you.
We're really grateful, Gaia, for your insights today. So thank you for sharing them. But Bodo, do you want to share your thoughts about the futures to round us off? And then we'll go through a couple of questions before we land.
Well, thank you very much, Ivan. Well, so much has been said where I would say fully agree, interdisciplinary, trying to embrace failing quickly and learning from failures. I'm very optimistic in terms of the future. And in fact, even the worst thing which has happened now, the pandemic, has had positive side effects. If you think about it, we are suddenly dragged into using technology much quicker than we could normally have achieved this. And now people start experimenting, saying, well, hang on, if we use Zoom to teach, well, maybe we should teach differently. We can't just, you know, transfer our lectures on Zoom and think that's it. Maybe we should embrace gamification. Maybe we have some coaches, etc. So there is this feeling that now this has been possible. We have mastered the first problem of the pandemic. So where do we go from here? It's obviously possible. And I think what I see is that both on the academic side and on the student side, or the learner side, or the customer side, whatever you want to call them, I always have problems with finding the right label, because in particular in business schools, we are in a peculiar situation that, at least as far as degree courses are concerned, students are both our customers and our products. So we have this sort of duality there between being a product and being a customer. But anyhow, what I noticed is that people have become much more willing to embrace experiments because they have had this first trial, perhaps forced trial into using digital tools. And so now they're much more confident and they want to go on from there. So from that point of view, I think even the pandemic has done some good, has had some good effects. Very final thought. Sometimes we have to also make thought experiments. I had an interview with the Financial Times not too long ago where I said, well, imagine a situation where we don't just accredit business schools, but we basically have a situation where degrees go out of date. So if you have an MBA and you don't learn and you can't show that you've done anything in the last 5 years, well, let's assume it's out of date. You lose the degree. So you have to learn in order to lose the degree. Of course, it won't happen. It's a bit provocative. I realize that. But we have to try and think out of the box and think about new ways to try and get employees and try to get employers to embrace lifelong learning. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Bodo. That's great. Okay, thanks everybody. We're going to go take a couple of questions now. just to sort of round off the session. We've got 5 in the chat, I think some of which we've sort of addressed throughout, but we'll go through it. So I'll ask perhaps a few questions. If one person wants to come in and give a sort of 1 minute sort of brief answer to them, we'll get through them and then for a few final thoughts. But quick question here. I mean, Bodo, you might be best. Well, actually, anyone. But what lifelong programs are the most sought after? Does anyone have any insights on that? You think actually this is a go-to program, whether it's around digital skills, you know, leadership development or emotional, you know, development sort of areas and things, or more applied practical skills in terms of you know, aspects of a particular sector, whether that's in medicine or health or some sort of service. Anybody got any thoughts on?
So the easy one is continuing medical education. So you need a degree, you need professional accreditation, and then you need continued academic, theoretical, and practical and observed skills throughout your lifetime. So that's really where it's very formulated. It's had a great impact on people's health. So that's the one I can share.
What kind of level of customer or students we are looking at, because the older people get, if they come, for example, to MBAs after they've already worked 5 years, 10 years, etc., they need different skills from the very young student. Because in order to work, for example, interdisciplinary, you have to understand what your discipline is. So you have to have some basis as well. But as a general rule, I would think what is more and more demanded is the ability to understand different views, different disciplines, and to work interdisciplinary. I think that's super important. So I think there's a shift away from purely technical skills, from pure knowledge, to communication and to working with subjects or with, let's say, problems which are ill-defined, which have a lot of uncertainty, and where perhaps the most difficult part is to ask the right question rather than to find the answer. So I think this sort of problem-solving skills, question-asking skills, communication skills are super important these days.
And Bodo, if I may actually expand on that, I think it's back to the element of personalization and customization. Lifelong learning means different things for each and every individual. So the idea is, as Bodo mentioned, start with questioning what I'd like to learn throughout my life, what's the impact that I would like to deliver, and based on that, find the learning, whether it's a program, whether it is nuggets, whether whatever, and then go for that.
Thanks, Ehab. That's great. One question here that's interesting. I mean, a lot of these questions I think we've touched on in various ways, so I won't pick up on all of these. But one interesting one that we've not perhaps touched on so much is, you know, should informal learning somehow be accredited international standards? And we've obviously talked about university accreditation, but is there a broader sort of remit of a new body coming together, perhaps in some sort of looking at sort of international standards in that domain? Is that something of interest or concern across what you're seeing?
Well, I'll let you into a secret, because yesterday we had an AMBA board meeting, AMBA BGA board meeting, and among others, we discussed digital credentials which are possible via blockchain in order to try and verify them, and to try and set up systems, which are various ones are on the market, where basically the learner, the employer, the provider of the learning material, the student, etc., they can get it certified. And of course it has to be international. Who cares about national? We are too small. It has to be international. It's not a question, it's an absolute must.
And absolutely, in our health sector, public health sector, that's exactly where we're going. We have very strong educational qualification requirements, but the reality is we require, so we are thinking of stacking credentials, international accreditation, and also because of WHO works with governments directly, we're trying to see if health in the health sector, even the ones that we offer that fill the gaps could be, and also linked to career as well. So I think it's not just isolated, and that's exactly the purpose. And a lot of it is it's in areas that are not even well defined yet, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't go there, because that is the future. And Bodo, we are also looking at micro-credentialing using blockchain and so on. So I think many organizations are beginning to say, yeah, okay, it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of how. So I totally support that.
And just an idea here, I'm not sure how again practical it is, but again just a food for thought. So when you look as well at like MBAs who joining are the like the students who are joining MBAs, they're coming with various degrees of experience and background. So however they go through the same curriculum at the end of the day. So the question is, can you look at these experiences and you can start to equate this with like specific knowledge that are within the curriculum and say that, you know what, you don't really need to have a class on supply chain because you're already a supply chain director in your organization, for example. You can come and teach it rather than come and have a class on it. Can we do that? I know that there is like the continuous education, you know, kind of element for you to sustain a specific certification. So how can we take this practice and make sure that it is part of the whole induction and enrollment in those programs, and not treat both as completely two different things when it comes to MBA program?
Let me put something in for Microsoft here, despite the fact that I'm not the Microsoft person on the panel here. It's happening because Microsoft's Flexa, for example, which is used in a number of different business schools, has the purpose of looking at the specific requirements, at the specific backgrounds of the students who come into an MBA, and then literally tailor what they're doing while they're on the program based on their background, based on with whom they best collaborate while they're on the program, and then of course based on their own career aspiration and their likely career. So it's happening, and it's a wonderful way of combining what's happening in terms of the digital tools with what's happening in business schools. And I see
Amazing.
David is coming back to remind us of the time. So
thank you, Bodo. And I mean, I think a big thanks to everybody today. I mean, I think it's been a marvelous discussion. We've touched on, I think one of the themes to come out is not only, I mean, of course, we've talked a lot about the what, the why, the how, and the issues, the challenges, the opportunities, the past, the future. But I think one thing that's shared throughout is all of our passion to support learners throughout the world, because actually there are people throughout the world that are, you know, in great need and desiring a lot for you know, all sorts of different levels of learning and in industry and in academia. And I think, you know, our passion to come and try and serve those communities is what comes through. So a big thank you from me. I'll hand back to David now, who will probably round us off today as well. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was going to say, what an incredible panel. Your passion is absolutely infectious. And I think that I can see from the comments coming through in the chat, the delegates were taking a lot from this as well. So thank you very much for your can-do and also your practical advice and help as well. I thought that was fascinating. So just once more to thank Ehab, Geraint, Gaia, Elisaveta and Bodo for your time and your insight this morning. And also, most of all, thank you to Ivan and also Studious Digital Education for your support for this conference, and also for your great support in helping us build this session and running it so incredibly effectively. Thank you very much. Just to remind everybody, the next session takes place at 2:30 today, GMT, and that is Making an Impact, Corporate Social Responsibility. And you should all have received an email just notifying you of the joining instructions. So I think that's all from me. Once again, thank you, Ivan, and thank you once again to our panel. And I look forward to seeing you all later on. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody,
Thank you
and
very
bye-bye.
much. And stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Stay safe.